your birth order affects you way more than you may have realized. Your birth order, whether you're firstborn, secondborn, thirdborn, or an only child, is a psychological role you've taken on from childhood. It's a character, a script that was given to you. And unfortunately, if you do not step out of that identity, if you do not change that, what happens is that will control you. It will control how you are in relationships, and it can even control how you are at work or in your business. So you've got to step out of that role and create a new one. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do that. I'll give you 3 things. First, let me tell you a quick story about how this works. So someone I know that is a firstborn. And what's interesting is everybody knows that this individual is extremely controlling and extremely bossy. Yet, a high achiever, highly accomplished, can be counted on, is reliable, and is there for people. So you see the dichotomy here. As a firstborn, they had a lot of responsibility thrust on them, unfairly. Some of them were parentified, where they had to take on the burdens that they shouldn't have. There was a lot of expectations on them, and they took the hit that the other kids didn't get a chance to get. For example, firstborns could have been disciplined harshly. Their parents were young, or they were new at parenting. They didn't have this thing figured out. Everybody's figuring this out as they go along, and they got the brunt of their parents' stuff. Maybe because their parents were young, they weren't mature. In that sense, their emotional issues were projected onto their child. They couldn't control their temper, couldn't control their mouth, and may have been abusive. By the time the second child or the third child comes around, those parents have more confidence in their parenting. They relax more. Maybe they're not at survival mode as much, or even if they are, they know how this thing goes, so they're not reacting to everything as much. And so the children that come after get a different experience in that family. So for this individual, what happened with her is this firstborn character that she was playing affected her life. It would help her excel at her job. She would take on leadership positions. She would excel. However, it affected her friendships. Her friends felt that she was bossy and controlling, or she wanted to be the one in control all the time, or she wanted to be the one to take charge and have the power in what they're doing. So it alienated her from her friends. In relationships, same thing. She didn't trust the leadership of her spouse. She didn't allow her spouse to lead her at times. She was always playing that role of being the firstborn. Psychologically, it also created a rift with her and her younger sister, because her sister was the baby of the family. So there was a lot of resentment there, a lot of anger, and just some of it justified. However, because she was so stuck in that role as a firstborn, and her identity was wrapped up in that, she couldn't conceive of becoming someone else or stepping out of that. And so that's one example of what happens when you get stuck in those roles. Now, you might be wondering, well, what about the baby? Well, the baby of the family, what happens is, as you can imagine, some of those stereotypes are true. But there are deeper psychological things with each role anyway, each character in the family. But with the baby, because the parents are at a different psychological point, now they have multiple kids, maybe they're busier, they're not monitoring as much. That child gets away with things. That child learns that people will do things for them. That child or individual may not be able to face tasks and challenges better because they've been, grown into that role. Meaning the family members around them projected that role onto them, and they stepped into that role as the baby of the family. So let's go into the future and imagine how someone who grew up in that psychological and sociological position how they would operate in the world. And let's just do extremes, because no one is totally one way. But just for the sake of understanding it, let's see what would happen. Well, a baby in the family could come into relationships and be manipulative. They've learned to manipulate themselves to get their own way. They could have tendencies that are selfish and self-centered and self-absorbed. They could feel, avoid challenges, avoid real achievement because they're in the shadow of their firstborn's achievement. So you see how these psychological positions can affect people. Let's talk about the middleborn. Middleborns, and each position has their, we'll say, positives and negatives. But what's important with middleborns is because they're in the middle, they're not the firstborn that's expected to shine. They're not the baby. They can feel lost. They can feel a lack of belonging, a lack of truly not knowing their place. And that can be the negative. The positive side of that is they can be skilled in being mediators between people. They may be skilled in understanding human behavior. And you could see, as they've said, in certain occupations, that can attract these psychological positions, right? So mediators or lawyers possibly can become, or a lot of those positions are filled by middleborns, right? You may see CEOs or whatnot, firstborns, right? And so that psychological position is taken to the fullest in everything a person does, in relationships, as I mentioned, in their work, right? In the rearing of children, and how they feel about themselves. And the problem is, if you don't take the time to examine these roles, then you'll just be playing it out and get disappointed and set yourself up for issues because your identity is stuck within that role. So what do you do? So number one, identify the role that you're in. Now, here's the thing. Sometimes, you could be you could be a secondborn, but actually take over the firstborn role. Maybe the firstborn becomes someone who's a disappointment to the family, doesn't measure up with their expectations, and then all that energy is put onto the secondborn. So the secondborn becomes the star, becomes the responsible one, becomes the one that has all these positive expectations on them, and they fulfill them. Here's a big problem with that, which I'm gonna get to. We generally conform to people's expectations, especially children. They've done studies on this. So a authority figure's expectations of a child shapes the child's behavior. They actually conform to that authority figure's expectations. So if an authority figure feels that this child has potential and is intelligent, that child starts to operate in their behavior and their attitude as if they are that, right? And the reverse is true. If an authority figure feels that child doesn't have much potential and is a screw up and is a clown and blah blah blah, the child will start to meet those expectations, those self-fulfilling prophecies. So our parents and authority figures had a lot of great influence over shaping our personality and our behavior, as well as our position in our family. Right, these are all unconscious things that are happening. It's not consciously, but they're unconscious. So it's important that you identify first what role you're in psychologically, right? So you could have been the secondborn, but maybe you took on the firstborn role. Or, be honest, you're the secondborn, you were the baby in the family, or you're the middleborn. If there's multiple children, 4 or 5 children, check your psychological position, right? The role, the script that you played more, that you took on more than anything else. And then ask yourself, what did I have to believe about myself to make this true? Right? Examine your beliefs. So what is it that I'm believing about myself for this to be true? And be honest, you'll start to uncover these beliefs that you have. And then ask yourself, well, based on my behaviors, based on the patterns in my life, right? Keep digging. What else do I believe about myself, about the world, about others for this to be true? And you'll start to reveal a lot of information about the role. And what you're doing is you're making a profile of this character. And you're identifying the character's beliefs. But you're understanding that this is not you. These are the beliefs of that character. And that's step 2. So step 1 is identify the beliefs, patterns of that character. The hidden suggestions that were given to you, the beliefs you took on, the patterns that you do. And I would suggest you also see how you took it to the extreme. How did you take it to the extreme? Right? When do you go into baby mode? When do you go into firstborn mode? Right? To the extreme. That's really not good for you. Then see that character as a character that you have been playing and not who you are. That's the difference. This is what we call in hypnosis and in change work as a pattern interrupt. You're going to now, by identifying with something more and letting go of that identity, of that role, you're interrupting that pattern that would normally happen automatically. You're now stepping out of it. This is done so that you can catch yourself when you're becoming that character. You can catch yourself when your family's treating you in that way, or orienting with you, or nudging you to be that way. You're catching that pattern, and you're not giving them that same response. You're not giving them that same reaction. So that's step 2. And step 3 is choose the new response. Who would you like to be? Right? Who are you without that role? Right? And this is called, people call it the abyss, or the 0 point, or the blank slate. This is huge. This is you having a blank slate and having pure potential available to you to be able to remake yourself based on something that's core within you, which is your values, your truth, who you are. And by doing this, what you're doing is you're helping to align yourself to more to who you really are and what you truly value, right? Not the values that was put on you by your family, or the script that was given to you. You're deciding for yourself who you are, what's possible for you, right? And who you are not. And this may take some time just to list those characteristics. And after you've listed those characteristics, you're going to continue interrupting the old pattern with the new you, with the new behaviors. What would it be like to be that person? Allow yourself to visualize and imagine that. What would it be like to respond differently? What would it be like to live from this new you? What would it be like to know that you're not the baby anymore, or you're not the firstborn anymore, having to take on the burdens of others? You don't have to do that, right? You're not the middleborn, feeling lost or in between, or not sure of who you are, right? You know who you are. You know what's important to you. You know what you deserve. You know what you stand for. And you living that out, and it takes repetition. It takes time. But by you living that out, you're going to reprogram and rewire these new patterns into your nervous system and into your subconscious mind. And this is how you step out of this birth order pattern. Now, if you like this video, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, comment, because I will be making more.